Hey everybody, well this is going to be attempt number 3 of this video. I tried just recording it straight through the YouTube controls and bad things happen. Anyways, I saw a comment earlier on my post about how and why people will not save you and will not rescue you. It was a comment by a viewer named Maddie D. Maddie, M-A-D-D-Y, and then D. So thank you very much for the question. Ask a question that got my hamster overly caffeinated, and it, once I'm going, I can't let it go. So Epiphany's got to go to the internet. And it was the question regarding gun violence and mass shootings, and the mechanics of how and why people will not protect you. And the question basically was, well, what were they expecting by having so many guns? What did we expect would happen? And why do people need so many guns? Why do people need guns anyways? Nobody needs guns. And the questions really hit me because this morning I try to listen to. So I have a rotation of people that I listen to, from left, far left, center, right, far right. I also dive into some of the more extreme, polarized topics, like feminism, MGTOW, incel, that kind of stuff. Because I like to keep my ear to the ground for and all the things ever, right? So this morning, it was a Jordan Peterson video, and in the video, the question was posed basically, why is it was a question being asked of the university, why are we allowing Dr. Jordan Peterson to come here and speak? For those of you who don't know, he's a racist, he's a bigot, he doesn't support trans rights, he wants to set us back 50 years, he doesn't support use of gender pronouns, he opposes legal protections for transgenders, and all of these things. And it's just on and on for like a few minutes. And after it was all done, the guy ended with, Jordan Peterson is a moron who is just racist enough to irritate people and get attention. And after all that was done, his response was pretty brilliant. And he goes, well, that's actually, not as bad as some of the things other people say. These are things that I hear a lot. I hear repeated over and over. It's somebody else, and this is what he said. He said, "This is what it sounds like when you hear when you hear somebody speaking their doctrine, whatever they've been indoctrinated with. Like what they're doing is they're reciting an ideology. So virtually none of this has come from the individual themselves." But this comes from an ideology, and y'all know I've been reading up like hell on states of consciousness and the structures of reality and things like that, and it hit home with me this morning, watching this video, and then again this evening, seeing these questions being asked on my video, and it was sort of eye-opening because I'm guilty. I know I have ideologies that I trumpet from time to time on my channel, and by time to time I mean like several times a minute on every video I do ever. But no, it was just, this is what it sounds like when ideology is coming through a person. And then he said something that was really profound. He said that people do not have ideas. Ideas have people. And he credited that quote to Alexander Solzhenitsyn's book called A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, which is a story about a man who was wrongfully imprisoned and had to work in a work camp in the Russian Gulag system, or I guess Soviet, USSR, whatever they were back then, working in the gulags. Ideas have people. People don't have ideas. And in the book, what it was when people were talking about socialism and all the political movements, he said it was as if there was a crank, like you could just put a crank on the side of their heads and just start cranking them, and they would all be reciting the same thing. And so everybody has this crank on their head that you start turning it, and you hear the same things coming out of different people's mouths. And so this is what happens when you have an ideology. But more importantly, this is more evidence, I guess, more empirical evidence and observations of the concepts of consensus reality. Because what is an ideology but something that is generally very strongly felt within a consensus? And ideologies, I believe, even transcend the consensus realities of different cultures. So, but really think about this for a second. Because we hear this when we're talking about political talking points, right? With politicians sticking to their talking points, right? The views of the left, the views of the right. And we start saying things like, well, me personally, I support, I'm a conservative, right? So I support the right for somebody to have a gun to defend themselves. I support the right for everybody to have a gun. My viewpoint is that nature did it right with ants and bees and other colony insects, where the individual is armored, the individual is strong, and the individual is born with the ability for offense and defense. So they have attack on the front, defense on the back. And one ant by himself has everything he needs to defend and protect himself. But if you mess with the colony, then you get all the ants defending themselves, right? And I think that was pretty much the original view of the founders of the American Constitution. But I'm digressing, though, because really think about this. So we know that that's an ideology. Well, what does it sound like to come from the individual? Because none of that ideology is actually formed in your head. I mean, the whole right to bear arms and all of that, that wasn't my original idea. That was the original idea of the founding fathers of the country, and then parroted down through the generations to me. So that's consensus, right? That's an ideology that I'm parroting, right? So how do you get around this? Like, well, how can you actually be an individual on this? And it was in the comments that I put. And what you have to do is when you're discussing ideologies and you have something that's sort of a loaded question. And I have to explain this first before I talk about what to do about it. So questions like, why does anybody need guns? Or, what did they expect would happen by having so many guns in the country? I mean, it's inevitable. Well, these are when you think about these questions more slowly and think in terms of if you're seriously asking somebody to sit down with a pencil and paper and a stencil to flow chart all the reasons why or why not, it's actually a very unanswerable question. It's not answerable. Why? Because it's mostly rhetorical. But in this sense, from the point that Dr. Peterson was making, is this. It's not an actual question so much as a statement of ideology. See, because the answer is known. See, you know the answer first. The answer is we don't need guns. Right? It's sort of like Jeopardy, right? Why do we need guns, right? The answer is already there. The ideology is already there. The ideology is we don't need guns. And it's just stated as a rhetorical question. So the answer is already given. So this is not questions like this are not a serious, or not so much serious, but they're not a question in the sense of normally the way questions are formed about whenever we go on an interrogative mental process, we'll call it, is we're going around doing our thing, growing beards, whatever, and we observe something that does not align well with consensus reality, and our observations do not match our idea of consensus. And so then we enter into cognitive dissonance, we get curious, and we must resolve this contradiction of our our reality. So we have to resolve this, right? And so we get curious, we investigate, we look into why this happened, and what can be done about it, and then we adjust our knowledge accordingly. But when it's reversed, the answer is already given, so the question is not a fair question. What did they expect? They're strangers. How should I know? Do you want me to ask 300 million people what they expect? The answer is no, I can't do that. I don't have that kind of time. It's been 10 minutes already, and I only got 5 minutes left. There's no way in hell I can ask. Um, what did they expect, and why do people need guns? So the solution then, if you want to convert from ideological regurgitation, then what you have to do is you have to switch the mode of your mind. You have to place yourself as the individual into the time and space that originates the conversation, right? So you, the individual, if we're talking about the mass shootings and what can be done about mass shootings, and why do people need guns? Well, let's ask that question and use your imagination, Wayne's World, like, and put yourself, try to imagine being in that situation. There's videos, look it up, and watch it. And place yourself there with the shooter, the active shooter. And then when you think about all the people in the Walmart, and you say, why would they need guns? Well, if they're in a need to defend themselves, yes, if they don't have guns, somebody else, the mass shooter, has a gun. Well, if we'd had no guns here, that's not to say that the guns wouldn't exist, right? Maybe he just goes and starts setting people on fire, or goes on a stabbing spree. The world's your oyster. But you think about the individual, so you can't think about changing what's happening. Put yourself in the situation of somebody shooting, and then you say, would I want a gun? Would I want somebody else to have a gun? As a matter of fact, what options for self-defense do I want to be available? And what options for self-defense should be off the table? Well, if you start asking many people, hey, what are all the ways that you want to defend yourself? And somebody says, you say, well, I don't agree with you. They'll say, well, too bad. It's not you I'm defending, it's me I'm defending, right? But that's how the conversation starts. You start talking about the actual, like, if you were there, would you want a gun? And you can see this in other situations too, with like breastfeeding in public, right? I mean, obviously I don't breastfeed in public, but if I had the boobs, would I want to be looking for a lair every time I turn around to go running off to go hide and feed my child? Or to be like, damn, man, nobody has this kind of time. You know what? Fucking eat. Right? It'd be nice. So you have to think about it from the perspective of, if I had this problem, if I were in this situation, how would I feel? What would I want? What would I do? And I think that's a much better way to have public political discourse. And like I said in the beginning, I know I'm guilty for parroting my own ideologies, but in my defense, I just learned about this today. I think it's a good place to start. When instead of just talking about all the reasons why I support the Second Amendment and all that, how would I feel if I were there in the Walmart? What would I want to do first? And my answer first would be, I'd want to run away and get the hell out. We have the Second Amendment for guns. We need a shoe amendment. Everybody has the right to really good running shoes. And that would be my amendment of choice, quite frankly. So anyways, I'm out of time. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, comment, or share, and I'll see you on the next video.